Multiple suicide blasts across northern Nigeria leave dozens dead as the situation remains dire. As oil prices tumble, what will be the impact on global producers? And the Oscars may be over, but thanks to social media, the red carpet controversies continue. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Tonight, Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan says the tide is turning against Boko Haram and soon his government will defeat the Islamic militant group. Chadian military officials say its soldiers have killed 207 Boko Haram militants and seized large stocks of weapons and ammunition in fighting near the Nigerian town of Gamburu, close to the border with Cameroon. Now, the pronouncements came just a day after suicide bombers struck two bus stations in different parts of northern Nigeria, killing at least 26 people. In the first, a suicide bomber rushed onto a bus in Patiskum before detonating a blast that killed 16 people. The police say the bomber was a man, but that some witnesses had mistakenly blamed a teenage girl who was in fact one of the victims. In Tuesday's second attack, two suicide car bombers struck a major bus station in Kano, killing at least 10 people. Well, for more on the security situation in Nigeria, I'm joined by phone by Hausa Service reporter Ibrahim Ahmed, who is in northern Nigerian state of Bauchi. Ahmed, Ibrahim, first, the president says, well, we are striking hard against Boko Haram, and here they're detonating these multiple blasts. What are people thinking about this?
Well, exactly that's what is happening. The military is gaining in the major towns that have been held by Boko Haram militants, but in the rural areas and in some areas south of Borno, Yobe, and part of Gombe and Bauchi State, the militants are adapting by committing this act of suicide bombing to probably try to show that they are still relevant and they can adapt to what is happening. But as far as the major towns that have been held by Boko Haram are concerned, the military is gaining a foothold by occupying and capturing some of them.
In terms of the people's sense of security, when you talk to them, do they have confidence that things are going to be completely changed, especially by the time the elections are taking place?
Not really so. People are very skeptical about that. All they know is that the military is now trying to bring this issue to an end, but it is not going to be done before the elections, according to the people and experts you talk to. Even the military, when you talk to some of them, they will tell you that they will just try to make the Boko Haram impact as minimal as possible, but it is not possible to do away with them in such a short period of time. Remember that between 2011 and 2013, Boko Haram has been operating mainly inside the city of Maiduguri, but with the advent of the civilian JTF, they were pushed out of the city and they adapted in the forest. Mm-hmm. Now, if they are chased out of these towns they are occupying, they are still going into the forest, and they can still adapt and try to show that they are still relevant.
Now, very quickly, Ibrahim, there have been claims of many Boko Haram fighters being killed. Has anybody in Nigeria ever seen evidence of that, like bodies or anything that would show that actually those people have been killed?
Not really so. You just get a written statement from the military that they have killed such a number of Boko Haram militants, and you see nothing else. The first time I saw anything from the military was a video clip that was released about a day ago of the fighting in Monguno. That's all, but it just shows part of the fighting. There was nothing to show the number of the militants they have killed.
Well, Ibrahim, thank you very much. Hausa Service reporter Ibrahim Ahmed reporting live from Bauchi in northern Nigeria. Well, a human rights watchdog group is calling 2014 a catastrophic year. In its annual human rights report, Amnesty International says millions of civilians from Syria to Ukraine and Gaza to Nigeria have suffered horrific violence and human rights violations. The number of displaced people around the world exceeded 50 million last year for the first time since the end of the World War II. Now, the report accused world governments of failing to protect civilians from violence by states and armed groups.
The main point that we are making in our report is that the response from the international community and those who could potentially stop this from continuing has been dismal, in fact shameful. I think, and we are making some clear calls on what the world can do to reverse the situation and improve the protection which civilians deserve.
Amnesty says armed groups committed abuses in at least 35 countries in 2014 and called the rise of the Islamic State militant group a particular concern. Well, for more perspective on the Amnesty International report, I'm joined by Adute Akwe, the Managing Director for Government Relations at Amnesty International. Mr. Adute, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, now your report actually says response from the world powers to human rights violations, human rights abuses has been shameful. Can you elaborate?
Yes, we are very upset at the lack of action and leadership at the UN Security Council, where the P5, the major permanent members of the Security Council, have used their veto to prevent effective action by the UN in the Ukraine, in Syria, and in other major conflicts. And what we are recommending is that when there is actually a documented situation of mass atrocities amounting to the level of war crimes or genocide, these P5 members should relinquish their veto right.
Now, why does it appear that the permanent members are not as interested in protecting human rights and human abuses in these countries where it happens? You would think they're at the forefront.
Absolutely, and they should be, because that's the charge of the Security Council, to be the kind of point of decision-making for the United Nations. What appears to have happened is that a number of the P5 members have been protecting close allies or been trying to block or intervene for whatever regional or political self-interest, effective action by the international community. And that's what's really been at the heart of this.
Let's take a specific situation, like in northeastern Nigeria, where Boko Haram has been conducting a campaign of terror. How did the permanent members of the UN Security Council, for example, prevent this from being resolved? What could have happened differently?
Well, in the situation in northern Nigeria, the Nigerian government itself, I think, has been more of an obstacle than the P5, in that the Nigerian government has wanted to resolve this themselves. And this goes back historically to Nigeria's, the military's reluctance to have any action on their sovereign territory. But the P5 can and should be pushing effectively on the Nigerian government to implement the kinds of human rights reforms and transparency, both for the military activities that have happened, that have been unsuccessful, as well as what's going on now. You mentioned in your last report the role by the Chadian forces. There's no monitoring, there's no transparency. Not only do we know how many people they claim to have killed who are Boko Haram members, allegedly, we don't even know how many people have been killed as collateral damage. That kind of human rights oversight is the responsibility of the Security Council, and that's where we need effective action from them.
Now, would you pass the same verdict in other countries, say South Sudan, Central African Republic, the DRC, where human rights abuses still continue?
With both the DRC and the CAR, the Central African Republic, the Security Council has slowly, unfortunately very slowly, finally enacted and worked with the African Union to provide peacekeeping forces. The mandates there have been sometimes limited, and that has prevented them from effectively protecting civilians. But there are forces there. I think the real the most striking tragedies are the ones in the Ukraine and the ones also in oh my goodness, I'm forgetting in Syria, where just a total travesty and a refusal by the Russian permanent representative to allow a resolution to move forward. Yes. has damned these people to such suffering.
Very quickly, do you think the UN Security Council will actually even pay attention to your calls for the 5 members to, put themselves out of the table whenever serious decisions are to be made in situations of genocide, for example?
I think that if we are effective in mobilizing enough public outrage, in other words, reminding people that effective response is difficult, but it's being blocked by this political deadlock at the Security Council, that may be the difference between an effective Security Council and the situation we have now.
Well, we hope to see changes maybe in next year's report, right?
I hope so.
Well, thanks a lot, Adoti. Adoti Akwe is the Managing Director for Government Relations at Amnesty International. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, the global impact of falling oil prices. Stay with us.
I am Sheikh Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Welcome back. Falling oil prices and the changing implications for global producers was the topic of recent debate here in Washington. VOA's Caroline Turner has more in part 1 of our 2-part series on oil prices.
Over the last 8 months, there has been a dramatic decline in the price of oil worldwide. In June of 2014, Brent topped $110 a barrel. Now it is just under $50. As the price of oil continues to fall, the Wilson Center convened an expert global panel in Washington to discuss the economic and political repercussions of depressed energy prices. Analysts believe OPEC and Saudi Arabia are driving the price of oil down to drive out U.S. oil frackers. Fracking is the procedure of extracting oil and gas out of rock.
It's important to understand that OPEC or Saudi Arabia leading that effort is trying to regain market share, to establish itself as the dominant producer. We heard earlier that the U.S. in 2014 was the biggest oil and gas liquid producer. Essentially, in a different language, you can say the real swing producer of the world is the United States now. It's not Saudi Arabia anymore. And that is a major strategic and geostrategic shift that we have to take into account.
With the development of fracking in America, the world's oil supply has increased beyond demand. But so far, fracking is not profitable in the U.S. when oil drops below $40 a barrel. Once the frackers stop drilling, the oversupply is expected to decline and prices are expected to normalize above $60 a barrel, a profitable price to pump oil in the U.S. Until supply contracts, oil prices will languish and countries that export will continue to suffer from weak revenues. Oil's price decline has created dramatic consequences throughout the world. In Canada, it is still profitable to pump oil as low as $48 a barrel, but oil revenues will bring in $8 billion less this year to the Canadian economy. Colombia's oil revenues needed for infrastructure and education have been cut in half, and the Colombian peso has weakened.
It is estimated that $1 decline in price has a $200 million impact on fiscal revenues.
Oil revenue brings in 8 to 10% of Mexico's economy, which has suffered. But even if oil goes as low as $23 a barrel, pumping would continue and oil would be stockpiled. Some Middle Eastern countries like United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar have huge reserves and can survive a price drop. Iran, Iraq, and Bahrain are in poor economic positions and are suffering from the price drop. Africa's importing countries are benefiting from the drop in oil, while exporting countries have suffered losses to revenues. Several OPEC nations like Venezuela, Libya, and Nigeria are so reliant upon oil revenues, they face domestic unrest if they try to cut production.
Some countries that are not producing, low oil is good news. For those of us who are producing and relying on it, low oil is not that good news. And for countries such as Nigeria, which is in the peculiar position of being a major global producer and exporter and also a major importer of products, it feels the pinch both sides, high oil prices and low oil prices.
Oil markets could be in for a bumpy ride. OPEC decisions shape the oil market. If it cuts supply sharply, oil prices could spike. But Saudi Arabia, which produces 1/3 of OPEC oil, refuses to cut production. Demand is low because of weak economic activity and the trend away from fossil fuels. Carolyn Turner, VOA News.
Well, tomorrow on Africa 54, we'll have part 2 of Caroline Turner's report on oil prices, so be sure to join us. Well, internet penetration is growing in many parts of Africa. Although the economy is struggling in Zimbabwe, tech entrepreneurs say investors are jumping in to lay the foundation for what experts say is an untapped market opportunity in the region. Here's VOA's Paul Ndio.
When WebDev, a Zimbabwean IT startup, opened here just over 10 years ago, its founders never expected things would go well as they have. Hyperinflation in Zimbabwe was at all-time high, but perhaps one can argue that WebDev was at the right place at the right time, and it developed into a successful technology solutions business, just as Zimbabwe was emerging from an economic crisis. Today, the organization is one of the leading IT firms in the country. WebDev runs 4 businesses: Zimbabwe's first online payment solution, PayNow, custom software development, web hosting, and their most profitable venture is an online classified ads platform. Vusi Ndebele is one of the company directors.
Our target market is very much dependent on which of the businesses that we're talking about. We have our largest public-facing business, which is the classifieds business. It's a double-sided business model. So our aim as classifieds.co.zw is to provide a platform whereby consumers and businesses can search for products and services that they need or want on the internet.
The value of the business generated online in Zimbabwe is worth over $500 million annually as internet penetration grows, supported by mobile phone penetration, which is around 40%, according to technology commentator TechZim.
There are a lot of companies created in Zimbabwe that have an opportunity to reach out into markets because we had to solve problems here first. Because of not having those solutions available to us. I think the opportunity is huge, into the billions of dollars in value of business on the internet in the next few years to come.
The revenue comes from social network advertising, e-commerce, online ventures led by Zimbabweans and in the diaspora, and foreign entrepreneurs. Markets like Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya lead the way in tech business growth in Africa. But for WebDev, their focus is tapping new streams of revenue in places like Zambia and Botswana, where they can grow and improve the customer experience.
We enjoyed a lot of success when the economy could sustain the development of such big solutions. As the economic activity has kind of faltered in Zimbabwe, we're seeing less of those big projects coming to us for custom software development.
Independent economists say less than 20% of Zimbabwe's residents are in formal employment, and economic growth is flat, leaning due to shortages of electricity and capital. Many engineers hope Africa can jump to the front of the technology revolution.
I think for people that come in now into Zimbabwe and invest into startups, are able to invest into startups at a learning phase, but also at a very low cost.
Zimbabwe is currently rolling out its fiber cable, which is primarily allowing the residents of the capital, Harare, an opportunity to connect to the internet. But the economic conditions in the country mean that the profits from the internet businesses are not likely to reach the masses for years. Paul Niho, VOA News.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. It's all about the dreads. An Oscar's red carpet crack leads to a formal apology. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. Nigerian president says he's turning the tide against Boko Haram, and the military releases video of regional operations against the militants. In Sudan, thousands rallied in Khartoum on Tuesday to support President Omar al-Bashir for upcoming elections, despite plan for opposition boycott. In Algeria, police stopped protests against energy giant Sonatrach's controversial shale gas development. Finally, in Niger, churches try to rebuild after the Charlie Hebdo riots as nation's minority Christians remain fearful. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. The Oscar red carpet drama continues. Disney star Zendaya Coleman has hit back at E! television personality Juliana Rancic, who commented that the dreadlocked dawning actress probably smells like patchouli oil or weed at Sunday's Oscars. 18-year-old Zendaya took to the Twitter to criticize the comments, calling Rancic's comments racially insensitive and ignorant. Rancic took to, where else? Twitter to apologize for the remarks, writing, "Dear Zendaya, I am sorry I offended you and others. I was referring to a bohemian chic look. Had nothing to do with race and never would." Well, next up, how about a show featuring some of Europe's earliest fashion trends? But believe it or not, the Vikings, people of Scandinavian origin who lived in Northern Europe 1,000 years ago, developed fashion trends that spread to the Baltics, the UK, and many other countries in the decades that followed, and can be seen in fashion even today. A recent show in Copenhagen highlighted some of Viking-style clothing that wouldn't look out of place in the year 2015. Natural materials like silk, wool, and linen kept warriors comfortable during conquest, while double necklaces for the ladies added a touch of bling. Well, and finally, American cigar lovers rejoice. Stooge smokers in the U.S. Are salivating over the prospect of legally buying and enjoying Cuban cigars, famous cigars, in the wake of easing of decades-long trade and travel restrictions with the island. Americans can now purchase up to $100 worth of rum or cigars in Cuba to take back to their friends and relatives. Experts say that that is 3 to 20 cigars, and cigars brought back to the U.S. must be for personal use only and not for resale. And that is what is trending today. Well, the modern cultural phenomenon called hip-hop might not seem to have much in common with religion. But two professors at Rice University see a lot of similarities. In fact, they have structured a popular class around the idea and have now produced some videos of their lectures so that people around the world can take the class online. Here's VOA's Greg Flakers.
Bernard Freeman, better known as the hip-hop rapper Bun B, says hip-hop and religion both examine the basic mysteries of life.
Hip-hop asks the hard questions about life. Why are we here? What is our purpose? Who are we? And we use different lessons within the culture to help people deal with these things and help people try to find these answers.
Bun B developed the course on hip-hop and religion with Rice University religion professor Anthony Pinn, who says faith has long been expressed through music.
And historically, churches have been patrons of the arts. Some of the music that has motivated and moved people for centuries was commissioned by churches.
Pinn also sees a parallel between Christianity, which started as a small Jewish sect in a far corner of the Roman Empire, and hip-hop, which developed partly as a response to gang violence in New York.
Hip-hop culture, born within the context of urban decay from unlikely persons and personalities, goes on to transform how we describe, understand, and work within our world.
Raymond Cano and Dimitri Luke took the hip-hop and religion course and found it rewarding as well as challenging.
If you're passionate about learning and you're curious about it, and you're willing to put in the work, it's an amazing class.
The class delves into social problems and economic challenges that even students face, says Dimitri Luke.
It's not as easy to get a job and to live the same American dream that we've been living, and I think hip-hop questions that dream.
Both students say they also gained insights into religion and spirituality through the course.
Let's talk about how hip-hop artists use Christian signs and symbols within the culture.
Now, thanks to Rice University placing the course online, students everywhere will be able to sign up and explore the connections between the worldwide spread of hip-hop culture and the deep-rooted traditions of the world's religions. Greg Flakers, VOA News, Houston.
Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us here in Washington. Have a good night.
Music is something that brings people together.
Music educates, it motivates, it's a bridge.
Music. Ali.
On
VOA.
I am Sheka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent.